Hey, people should be flittering in now. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. You're welcome to have your cameras on as well. It's always great to see people. But of course, we understand that life happens. So if you need to keep your camera off, that's fine. But if you can put it on, that's amazing. Hi everyone, my name is Nasia and I am joined by my colleague Grace and we are from London Funders. Welcome to day 3 of our 2024 Festival of Learning. It is a pleasure to have you all here with us and we hope that you have enjoyed the festival so far. Just a reminder, the festival is an opportunity for London Funders members to come together to share learning and ideas and be inspired by others in the funding community and civil society. We have a really packed programme this year, with the sessions categorized under 5 core themes: participation, process, equity, collaboration, and systemic change. So we really hope to see you at other sessions during the festival. London Funders will be live tweeting from @London Funders. The hashtag is hashtag Festival of Learning 24, and we'll drop that in the chat as well. We are also recording this session so that we can capture the lessons that are emerging from today. So let us know if there's anything that you would not like us to broadcast. And we're also encouraging you all to get involved online. So do feel free to share what you're learning from this session and from other sessions via Twitter, on LinkedIn, and of course with your colleagues as well. A reminder that there's still 1 week left of the session. So if there are some more sessions, of the festival, so if there are some more sessions that you'd like to sign up to or register for, do so, because there's still space for you all, including at our festival finale happening next Thursday on a beautiful rooftop during what will be amazing weather, we hope, in Victoria. So please join us for the festival finale to look back on the festival and to also look ahead to the future of London Funders for the rest of the year. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kevin, Catherine, and Joe over at Cloudesley, who will take us through today's session. Thank you so much, Cloudesley team. We're very happy to have you here.
Thanks very much. Catherine's going to be putting up the presentation, but I'm going to start. I'm Kevin Turner. I'm one of the grants managers at Cloudesley. And our session, hopefully you're in the right one, is addressing climate change as a non-environmental funder. I'm going to just give you a little bit of background on Cloudesley, and then Catherine's going to take you through some background around climate change and the challenges, and then I'll talk you through the programs that we've been running, and then Catherine will talk a little bit more at the end, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions. So for those of you that don't know us, we're an independent charitable trust, and we make grants to people, organisations and churches in the borough of Islington. We're a place-based funder. We were founded back in Tudor times from the will of Richard Cloudesley, and we have both health and church charitable objects. And our charity receives income from both property that we own and investments. And we have an annual grant giving budget of just under 2 million, and that's split evenly between our health grants, which support Islington residents with health problems or who are disabled and who are in financial need. And we give grants through 2 individual grants programmes and to local organisations. The other half of our funding goes to Church of England churches in the borough of Islington for capital projects, and that's helping them to maintain their buildings and the services within them. And we're going to talk a little bit about the work we did with that side of our funding today. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Catherine.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on climate change. I'm not going to dwell too much on it because I assume if you're here, you're probably on board with the topic of climate change and sort of know your stuff a bit. But I think when you sort of live with a crisis, when you live with something, you acclimatize to it and it becomes normal. And I just want to sort of reinforce this is a crisis and we are in a very difficult situation at the moment. I think it's worth just sort of a reminder at the top. Sorry, that's depressing. Everything's a bit depressing at the moment with all the crises that are happening, but I'm just going to depress you a bit more with this, and then hopefully we'll talk about what sort of things we can actually do about it. So here we've got a quote. This comes from a letter written by scientists to wealthy families. but it's really relevant to all philanthropists, all grant-giving organisations, trusts and foundations. And it's a letter from scientists, which is really sort of exhorting people with money to give to climate change. I think at the time this letter was written in 2019, something like 3% of philanthropic giving was going to climate change, a really small amount. And as they highlight in this letter, there's extraordinary ecological collapse. The current rates of deforestation, carbon emissions, species extinction, and land degradation are a threat to us all. Whatever your core focus, the changes to our natural world are critical to the lives of the communities you support. And I think that's something that I'll emphasize throughout, is that whoever you're supporting, they will be affected by climate change. This affects everyone and it affects every cause. So it's something that we all have to consider and think about with our funding. The image on the right is a picture of what the world looked like in the summer of 2023. That's the temperature. About 100 years ago, that would have been blue. About 50 years ago, it would have been slightly orange, and now it's very red, which is very hot temperatures. Okay, this is something called the planetary boundaries. It's a concept of 9 planetary boundaries within which humanity can thrive and develop and keep going. If you exceed those planetary boundaries, then there's lots and lots of risks. The safe operating space is the green circle in the middle. This gets updated year on year. As of last year, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries were exceeded. And you can see by quite a large amount. 2 of the remaining planetary boundaries are pretty close to being exceeded in the near future. It's really only the ozone depletion that's kind of within acceptable bounds at the moment. And this is all just to really emphasize, this isn't something that's going to happen in the future and we can pay attention down the line once we've got the current crises figured out. This is another crisis that is happening right now, right in this moment, and really needs to be dealt with very soon. Okay. In terms of what the impact of that is, it really is all-consuming. So if you look at the sort of outer ring of this, you're looking at damage to infrastructure, you're looking at food insecurity, heat stress, pests expanding, causing more health problems, localized flooding is going to be a major issue. And of course, it's really important to stress that these things don't affect everyone equally, that it's going to be the lowest income families, minoritized communities that are going to be more affected by some of these things. Heat stress is going to affect older people more than others. You know, pollution is affecting younger people and affecting their health more than it's affecting adults. So it's really, it's not equal. It's a justice issue because it's the rich in society that are largely have the larger carbon footprints and the causing issues, and it's the lower income people who are really going to feel the impacts and be less prepared to deal with them. For London, this is what climate risk looks like. So this is primarily heat risk and flood risk. If, you know, rising seawater, potentially the Thames barrier is breached, then flooding could take out most of Southwark. So this is kind of what it looks like. This is also using sort of deprivation statistics, again, highlighting that this is going to affect people from lower income communities more than it affects people from higher income communities. So that's the climate risk. So if you fund in London, climate is coming for you. And I think really the thing I want to emphasize is that if you're thinking about funding climate work, it's really a when, not an if, because if you don't fund climate change prevention, you will eventually be funding work to address the impact of climate change when that hits the community. So it's really we all will fund this soon. It's just when we fund it and whether we can get ahead of the issue in any way. So finding a way to fund climate change. So I think we've sort of emphasised there that it is going to affect everyone and it's going to affect all aspects in life, and taking that into consideration, whatever you fund, whoever you fund, it's going to link into your objects. There is always going to be a way to link it into your existing funding, to link it into what you're doing currently. Now, Cloudesley, I reckon, having worked in the funding area for a while, has some of the strictest objects out there. So Kevin went over them earlier. We have very, very strict charitable objects around health side is people with an existing health problem and in financial need and who are resident of Islington. And our church object is the upkeep and repair of the fabric of the building and the maintenance of services within. We regularly have to seek legal advice to see whether or not we can fund something. It is very sort of particular. These are our legal objects. They're not our particular funding programme. We can only fund within these bounds. So I don't think you can get more restricted than us. I'm not sure I know many foundations that have narrow objects. So I feel like if we can do it, then most people can do it. For us, our way in was the church object. So we do capital funding in this area. Lots of, stonework and roof repairs and all of that. So retrofitting buildings, which Kevin's going to talk about a little bit more, what exactly is involved in the project. But it wasn't a massive leap from that to sort of putting in, instead of replacing a boiler, putting in a heat pump or something like that. It sort of fit for us. So we, like I said, we sought legal advice to confirm that fell within the object and to sort of get the sort of details right, and that was confirmed. So that was our way forward, was sort of doing the retrofitting of buildings and working on the capital side of making buildings more energy efficient and moving them towards net zero carbon. But there are lots of other ways if you're not that interested in capital projects. There are all sorts of things you can do. If you're working with young people, you could do youth action. If you're working with minoritized communities, you could look at sort of decolonising the environment sector, sort of work with projects that are sort of moving the conversation in that way. You could look at community food growing. Canopy cover is going to be a major thing, planting trees. Community energy projects. There's a lot out there. I think sometimes you can think with climate change that either we fix it on a global scale or a national scale, or that's it. But there's a lot of things that exist within communities that can be done. And I'd recommend just 2 resources to help with that. One's from the NPC. It's called Introduction to Environmental Philanthropy, and one's Active Philanthropy Funding the Future, How Climate Crisis Intersects with Your Giving. And they're both really excellent resources that will just, you find what you're currently funding and it will tell you how climate change links and what sort of projects you can fund. So they're really great, and I would really recommend them if this is something that you're currently thinking about doing. Okay, I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but just to touch on it, there are other ways to address climate change beyond funding. You can look at your investments and where they currently are. You could look at retrofitting buildings within your portfolio if you hold them as part of your sort of investment portfolio, or if you own your own building. You can decarbonise your operations, vegetarian catering only, no paper printing. There's all sorts of things that you can do. Again, I recommend the funder commitment on climate change. I'm sure many of you are already signatories, but if you're not, do take a look. You don't have to be a member of ACF to sign up. It is open to everybody. So I would recommend that if needed. Great. Okay, I am going to hand over to Kevin.
Thanks, Catherine. So we previously run a sustainable church buildings project, and we're currently running the second one. So, and the first one was between 2017 and 18, and that was before Catherine and I worked for Cloudesley. So I did some questioning about how did this come about. And it very much came out of the 500th anniversary of Richard Cloudesley dying and passing on the legacy to Islington. And our trustee asked for something to be special and different in that year. And what came out of that was the Sustainable Church Buildings Project. In conversations with the diocese of the Church of England, that this was an area of priority for the Church of England. They, at that point, had a target to reach net zero by 2045. And there was real concern that churches were focusing on their immediate needs, the leaky roof, the kind of broken radiator, rather than thinking about how to make their churches more towards net zero and thinking about the sustainability of their buildings. So a programme was put together, funding was allocated, and this had a number of elements. First was that every church received an environmental audit delivered by ACOM, and that went in and it looked at how can that church be more sustainable in its building. So making recommendations from major things like solar panels and more carbon-friendly heating systems, to really small things like getting windows repaired. So you've got a broken window, heat's going out, and actually you're paying out for heating more than you need. There was a small grants programme, and pretty much all the churches received a small grant, and that was non-competitive. And 10 churches received large grants, ranging from about 10,000 to about 45,000. And what was interesting, out of those, 6 were for solar panels. It was a particular focus of that funding, that people were very keen on getting solar panels, and that was really challenging, balancing the kind of heritage issues of historic buildings against kind of sustainability. And at the time, heritage was very much trumping kind of sustainability, and there was lots of backwards and forwards with the local authority. We were assured that that's now moved on, but I think it's always a tension when you've got a building that's listed. But it was certainly a learning area, and lots of learning was shared with the churches around and what the churches had learnt from that programme. In the picture, we have the trustee who'd asked us for something special and different, receiving the Islington's Best Community Environmental Project by Camden Islington Sustainability Award. And it was just one of many awards that this initial project won. She was clearly very pleased in that photograph about how well it had gone. Next slide, Catherine, please. So we went back to churches. We were going to agree another kind of special project with the churches outside of their usual capital project. And we were very keen to bring in an access project, including improving accessibility, which we did. But the message from the churches was that they were really keen to have a second sustainability church project, that many of the projects that they were hoping to take forward, they weren't able to in the timescale of the first one. And certainly since the time of the first project, the Church of England has now agreed a net zero target of 2030, which is much tighter and much closer. So I think churches were much more focused on achieving this. This started in July 2023 and will run to the end of this year. And there are 3 main elements to the programme. Again, there are non-competitive small grants of up to 10,000 for every church. And there is support from Inspired Efficiency, which is a consultancy around sustainability, particularly in heritage buildings and churches. And there is a competitive large grants programme of up to 65,000 per grant. The next slide. The small grants, as we said, were up to 10,000, and people could apply at any time during the period of the project, so when they're ready. And decisions are made really quickly so people can move forward with those funding proposals. And it was a requirement that every church had an initial meeting with Inspired Efficiency, who'd reviewed their audit from the previous project and provided kind of professional advice about what areas might be the most suitable to take forward. And so far we've had 3 grants awarded, 1 for solar panels, 1 looking at lots of small things that help to make a building more sustainable. So looking at door and window seals, pipe lagging of the boiler, and really exciting things like that. And then 1 around upgrading the electrical metering to make the connection to solar panels work more effectively. Next slide. On the large grants, these are up to 65,000. And one of the criteria is very much looking at the carbon footprint of the church. First of all, is it one of the larger carbon footprints that we have in Islington? And will this project reduce that carbon footprint? It's linked to our spring 2024 grants round, which means churches could apply in both. So they could basically double their funding for large projects, either something that's related to it or part of the overall project, which is unusual for our churches to be able to have access to that amount of funding in one round. And we'll be considering applications soon. And this time there are two relating to heating systems, which are air to air. The Church of England won't consider boiler replacements for boilers unless there is no other option. So as boilers start to fail, churches are looking at alternative heating systems and an application regarding roof insulation. But it's important to stress that churches can apply for these types of works in any of our church rounds going forward. So it's not just the one opportunity, it just puts some additional capacity and focus in this round. And a key part of this project is the kind of professional support that's provided by Inspired Efficiency, which Catherine's going to talk a little bit more about now.
Thanks, Kevin. So yeah, I'm just going to highlight a little bit about why we have professional support. Why aren't we just putting more money into our grants budget and giving that out to the churches? Where this came from and why we thought it was important. So the professional support, really, it splits into three areas. Back in 2017, we had the audits. So the first thing that they're doing is sort of looking at the audits and updating it, and with all the sort of current thinking with where the churches have been. If there's a real change, they'll do a new audit, and then 3D scans of the church, which is just quite fun, and then up to 7 hours of consultancy support per church to take work forward. And that's really the key thing that I'm going to talk about now, is that sort of consultancy development support. So at Cloudesley, we actually have another sort of special project, as it were, called the Access Fund, which is great. It provides access audits to all the churches and then non-competitive grants of up to 10k to take forward the recommendations. So quite similar in some ways, but what we found is that there's a really high take up of access audits. Everyone's really keen to get that done, and then not so much take up of the grants. And so sort of learning from that, we really wanted to address that, because I think one of the big reasons for that is you can give someone a recommendation, but what are they supposed to do with it? What you know, if I say you need a heat pump, what do you know about heat pumps? Do you know what type of heat pump? Do you know what size? Do you know where it should go? Do you know what sort of contractor to get to get that? Like, largely, whether we're talking about the churches or whether we're talking about community centres or charity buildings or whatever it is, the people within that will not be an expert on retrofitting buildings and the different technology involved, and they will not have time. They will be doing lots of other things and addressing lots of other issues. And this being difficult, it's so easy for an audit report to get stuck on a shelf and never ever looked at again, because it's too hard and there are too many other really important things that need to happen. So really, this was sort of a key thing that we felt had to happen, particularly in this area, because a lot of the technology is so new and it's changing so much, and it's also that kind of perfect storm of it's really loads of people are talking about heat pumps and there aren't that many suppliers and they're getting booked up, and if this plumber says he can install one, can he? So it's really difficult. I want to call it quite a Wild West, but I think most of the time when you have these projects, you're sort of asked to get independent advice, and it's a question of, well, even would I get independent advice? So it's a really unknown area for many, and I think, as Kevin mentioned with the solar panels project, that didn't get permissions initially, but that again is causing additional costs. So, you know, you design a solar array and then you go to the council and they say, no, it's visible, redesign it. And then so you have to go back and then you pay for another redesign. And then you get a really like small array that doesn't have any power. So having someone there who can go, well, I don't think the council's going to approve this, or is able to have initial conversations with the people who make decisions before you get to the design stage, is really helpful. What Matt is his name, Matt Fulford from Inspired Efficiency. What Matt does is the really practical stuff. So he'll offer the advice and he'll offer the recommendations, but he'll also go out and get a quote, and he'll go and he'll talk to the council, or what's known as the DAC, which is the sort of people who make decisions on church buildings, and what you can and can't do to them. And he'll be able to sort of make the case and fill in the application, whatever the churches need help with, and a lot of it's largely practical, he'll do that. And he'll also just chase them. He'll say, have you put in an application to Cloudesley for your small grant yet? You should do that. I think you should do this. So he's just there as someone who holds their hand, helps them out, and really pushes things along. And I think that is really invaluable. And I think if anyone is thinking of running a similar project, if you're looking at, and it is important to state that it's very much the same, whether this is churches, obviously, but community centres, anything like that, you probably won't have the same concerns about listed buildings. They'll probably be a little bit easier, but it's largely the same. I definitely recommend having some kind of professional support element that really helps people to move away from the sort of theoretical audit reports into the reality of moving a building towards becoming net zero. I think it's a really important element. It was a really important element for us to invest in and to take the time and to sort of offer that out to people. And I think everyone has given us really great feedback on that element. They've really, really valued Matt's support. And I think it's really helped to move things forward at this stage. Great. Okay, so now let's just double check the time. We've got loads of time. Let's go. If Grace, is this your area? We're going to go into breakout groups next. So this is what we'd like you to discuss. You can very much freestyle it if some of them are more relevant to you than others. We're not strict. What is your organisation doing regarding climate change? What actions are they taking? Are there opportunities for you to do more? Is this funding? Could this be organisational practice if not funding? And how do you think your existing funding purpose might link to climate change? How does your sort of traditional group connect with these issues, and what sort of work do you think could be funded or you see yourself likely to fund? So, okay, we'll do that then. That's great. So yeah, I think in our group, we really talked about the capacity within organisations to take on this work and the challenge there. That a lot of organisations have, that they've got a lot else on, and that there just isn't room, that there isn't necessarily knowledge also in these organisations, or awareness of what's out there, what funding opportunities are out there. So there's a lot of elements there, and also the sort of the challenges if you're funding nationally, if you're funding in a larger area, is it, how much can you support any one group in particular? If you fund this work, then potentially you're not funding something else. So lots of challenges, but it sounds like, I mean, 2 organisations in my group were sort of really sort of in this area already and progressing work. So I think hopeful as well. Kevin, do you want to go next and say what's in your group?
Yeah, I think we had a couple of foundations that are working with young people, so we're already doing some small individual grants around climate, but thinking about how they could make that more of a theme going forward. I got a really interesting discussion with the John Lyons Foundation and Lynn about they also have property as well as investment, so making sure that the property that they own is as green as it can be. And real challenge of that when your properties are kind of Victorian and older, so kind of similar to Cloudesley, but also thinking about where your investments are going and the impact that that's having. So thinking about that side of things as well.
Right, and then Joe, sorry to put you on the spot, but you didn't know you were doing this. But can you do you mind just summarising what happened in your group?
Sure. Some of the things we talked about, there's a real sense in the group of the priority of the issue. So that was a kind of shared space to start from. And we also talked about some of the challenges. So particularly in relation to things like, we also talked about the national local difference and the challenges of trying to do these kinds of things nationally. It's about participatory grant making and whether being dependent on whether the participants are identifying it as a priority. And we've also talked about health and what's the links between health and climate and the kind of sometimes hard to define, but lots of kind of impacts between them. And we also talked about kind of areas aside from the grant making itself that organisations can make a difference, such as in operations.
Yeah, that's great. No, there are definitely massive links between health and climate, which obviously is relevant to Cloudesley because there are other objects. We talked about churches, but there are other objects as health. And although it's not something we're doing now, it's certainly something we're going to be looking at doing in the future. It will probably require looking at or reviewing our object, seeing if we got some wiggle room there. But there are lots and lots of connections, things like pollution and the impact that has on health, but also heat stress, massive impact on health there, particularly in older people and more vulnerable groups, and potentially sort of more pandemics, more sort of disease carrying pests if temperatures continue to increase and flooding becomes normal. So massive links. It really has links everywhere. Obviously like climate refugees, that will be lots of links into sort of the refugee and migrant and probably homelessness areas. So there really isn't any type of work that it doesn't connect to one way or another. Great. Okay. So I think we'll finish just if anyone has any questions, if you want to pop them into the chat or put your hand up, or that sounds the right way to do things, Grace. Tell me, or Nazit, tell me if I'm wrong. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? No?
I think that's a sign of I always say when there are no questions, it's a sign of a very clear presentation. And also, I think it takes people a lot of time often just to process things. But I'm sure the team at Cloudesley are always happy for their contacts to be shared. If anyone has questions that come to them in the middle of the night, just burning. But thank you very much, team. It was great to find out more about the different ways funders can actually engage with the climate crisis. So we're very appreciative of your reflections. Lynn has asked if there's a presentation that you can share. So if you're happy for a version of your slides to be shared, then yes, please send them over to Grace and I, and then we can send it back over to everyone else that was able to come. But thank you very much, everyone. Once again, a reminder that we still have sessions ongoing. So please look at the programme and register. and absolutely register to attend our festival finale happening next Thursday afternoon. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at other festival sessions over the coming week. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.